No more banks. Listen, the financial system is literally changing right before our eyes while the world is so focused on this war. In this video, I need to give you an expat financial system alert. This should really be a global alert. Every human that's on the face of the earth in every single country should understand the next steps of the digital ID and the system that is going into place right under our noses. While we are thinking about what's happening in Iran, how oil is over $100, there's a quiet shift happening across the board. And this strategic quiet means that the system is about to completely flip. It's a kind of administrative stillness, actually, where everything still appears to function as normal, while something deeper has already moved on. Right now, of course, headlines are filled with President Donald Trump and negotiations, maybe a little bit of China and how they're going through the Strait of Hormuz, Iran. But beneath that noise, another stage is being set, one that does not require sirens or an announcement. War has already reshaped money, obviously, not because governments announce it, but because systems have to adapt when world war happens. Energy flows are already being disrupted, currencies are already being strained, and trust is ultimately fractured across the board with America and her allies. What once required a bank, though, a branch, a waiting period, a signature, is now moving at the speed of light right as all of this is happening. Now, I don't know if you heard the news, but Bitcoin has just come out with a Visa card. XRP also coming out with a Visa card. And it's interesting how these things are taking place behind the scenes, almost quietly, while the world is in chaos. See, the world that you're going to wake up to in 2028, in 2029, and 2030, who knows where this conflict will be by then, will be a very different world than what you are witnessing right now. And this is why strategic relocation is so critical if you do not want to be a part of the digital ID system, or if you want to be somewhere that's just kind of forgotten about, like an island. See, with both XRP and Bitcoin, these are both crypto coins, digital payment systems. They function differently. Bitcoin is basically just backed by the fact that it's Bitcoin and it's not a fiat currency. It has gained lots of popularity because it was the first crypto of its kind. But XRP is much different. It's like a cross-border payments infrastructure. So it's backed by logistics and cross-border travel, the same way that you are starting to see African countries trade more with each other, maybe Asian countries trade more, or cross-continental between the Indian Ocean having more trade. You're going to see systems like XRP being the foundation of that trade, because newsflash, Iran has already stated that if you want to go through the Strait of Hormuz, you had better pay in Chinese yuan. But how long before they say, hey, we don't really want to use Chinese yuan. We want to use XRP as the digital token because it can occur in a few seconds instead of days and weeks. Can we talk about the illusion of stability? Because so many Americans and Westerners, especially older generations, believe that their bank is still the most stable place. Bank of America, Chase Bank. What are some of the more prominent ones? Wells Fargo, right? Those are like the places that were the top banks in the 90s and in the early 2000s. But we are in 2026 going into 2030, and this is pivotal because it all wraps in and it's tied together hand in hand. Banks used to be seen as the place where money resided, right? But they were never the origin. They were the intermediary to get you to access your cash, your resources, working capital, business loans, your mortgage, whatever it is. But here's the thing. Intermediaries only survive as long as they are necessary. Right now, something uncomfortable is happening. Let's be honest. They're becoming optional. People are not using banks as much. In fact, if you have been on the continent of Africa, you know, in countries like Tanzania and Kenya, they have M-Pesa, which is literally like a digital money app where you use a phone, which does not even have to be a smartphone. It can be like the '03 Nokia phone, and you send send money to someone through their telephone number. Okay. This is like very advanced technology, and it is alive already on the African continent. Okay. And so it's very interesting. It's not available everywhere, but it is available in Kenya and Tanzania. Now, other countries like Mauritius, Angola, of course, they have their different systems. Mauritius doesn't have as much of a mobile money network the way that Kenya and Tanzania did. Madagascar is also a little bit more behind. But across the board, countries are changing the way that they use these systems. So in East Africa, they don't use a lot of banks like that. Local people can actually get around without a bank because they have that phone number, and they can just access the phone number. They don't need a debit card. They don't need any of that. They just type in some numbers, send money through that number, pay for groceries in the store through that number, and call it a day. Okay. Now, if you like where this conversation is heading and you're like, these are the conversations that I want to have when I consider being an expatriate, a retiree, an entrepreneur abroad, somebody that's moving out of America, out of Western society, I want to continue this conversation. We are having the 20th edition of the State of the Diaspora coming up this Sunday, April 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern. There was such high demand for the one that we did 2 weeks ago that we are relaunching again for these urgent times, because literally we were in a ceasefire, but now the naval blockade is sending oil prices above $100. Visa's talking about you can have an XRP card and a Bitcoin card. There's a lot going on that you need to understand and know about, especially if you're someone that does not want to be too closely tied to a country with these digital ID systems. Maybe you want to be somewhere that's more like an island, that's a little bit more laid back and a little bit more forgotten about when it comes to this financial stage, because the major players in the world are going to occupy this crypto major stage and put these stable coins into governments, CBDCs, and we are going to see that they are implemented across the board. Not only that, but in the State of the Diaspora, we're also covering the best 5 countries that you can relocate to based on 3 core indicators: anti-corruption, okay, the least corrupt African countries; ease of doing business; and ease to get residency in that country, so that you are not wasting hundreds of dollars on visa fees for 2 years, so that you're not coming up against corruption and getting bribed for tens of thousands of twenties of thousands of dollars. Look, this is the time where you want peace in your relocation, not stress and risk. Check out the link in the description. Tickets are $100. This Bitcoin card is going to be a card that shouldn't exist, but actually does. Like, it feels like we're going into the year 2050. Leave a comment down below if you low-key feel like we're living in a futuristic sci-fi movie, okay? Pause for a moment and think about the fact that this is a contradiction. You can now hold digital assets, convert them literally instantly, and spend them anywhere where a global network is accepted, which is most places on earth. I think one of the only options that wouldn't be accepted is like maybe a Comoros or somewhere that's very much behind, which could be advantageous in the times to come. No branch visit, no conversion delay, no conversations, no locked funds, no, oh, my 50K, my 20K is locked up in here. None of that. If you need to process a residence fee, if you need to do anything, it can happen pretty instantly with these new systems. Just movement with a card, and a system that speaks both languages: old money, but new rails. Okay. That bridge is where the shift actually lives. So we see war happening above, but systems that are happening right below the surface. History rarely announces its turning points clearly. You have to look at the signs. It wants to distract you right now with the media, with everything that's happening. And, you know, we love to cover what's happening with the war, because from a macroeconomic standpoint, it is certainly important. But also think about what's happening, what laws are being passed, what initiatives are being passed on a global stage behind the scenes, what financial infrastructure is going to change in the world to come. And then if it is a digital ID super surveillance system, do you really want to be in America or the United Kingdom or Germany or Australia when that happens? I know my answer because I've been outside of America for 6 years. My answer is that I would want to be on the African continent, but you have to decide that for yourself. See, while these empires are arguing at the top, in our faces, infrastructure is silently being built beyond the surface. Because those oil tensions are escalating, currencies are being questioned. I mean, they're trying to de dollarize the dollar, but Trump is doing his best to not de dollarize the dollar, which kind of isn't working in America because the inflation, it's really only advantageous to be an American outside of the corporation country of America. And in response, the world is asking a very good question. What system is still going to work if everything else breaks? Somebody say, let's be real. Us as the diaspora, we already feel it. Moving between countries, acquiring second residence permits outside of our citizenship or main nationality, holding multiple currencies, trading and doing business in multiple currencies while navigating instability. The shift is not abstract at all. It's practical, it's urgent, it's right in our faces. And you have to think about it, strategize, and plan for it, no matter how difficult it seems. Because I'll be honest, when my husband first taught me how to exchange XRP on this platform and that platform, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm in 11th grade algebra 3 class again. Like, I don't want to deal with it, but it's like you have to find a way to figure out how to speak that language so that you understand how to maneuver your resources, or so that you understand how to avoid your resources being catapulted in this specific area. There's a lot of logistics that goes along with it. So I feel you if you're like, I'm confused. I totally feel you. But here's the thing. When you live globally, you're forced to learn quickly. Access matters more than ideology. Speed matters more than tradition, and control. They want to control the mess out of this world. Control is going to matter more than familiarity. This is the start of the hyper super surveillance system of the 2030s. So it's not necessarily the end of banks altogether, but let's be real here. Let's be precise. The role that banks had is being rewritten. They're no longer the sole authority over money movement and financing. They're becoming one option amongst many options. And history shows us something that's critically important. When systems become optional, they eventually become replaceable. So, no, Chase and Wells Fargo aren't going to shut down tomorrow. But 10 years, 15, 20 years down the line, who knows? As of right now, the world is focused on who is going to win the conflict, who's negotiating, who's going to come out on the other side, what happens to the oil after this, which nation gains leverage in these times. But a quieter, far more critical question needs to be loading and forming in your brain as someone who is awake, aware, follows the biblical truth, and wants to maneuver themselves and position themselves as wise as a serpent, but harmless as a dove. What happens to money when trust in these systems begins to shift? Because unfortunately, money does not exist in isolation. It follows infrastructure, confidence, control, compliance, all of these things, legalities. All four of these things are moving at once. And so if you're like, wow, what does this mean for me? Well, you don't need to panic, but you have to pay attention. It's not about hype or trends or speculation. This is about positioning, how you are going to position yourself in the end times, where your money is going to sit, how quickly it can move, how attached to one specific system you're going to be, how much under hyper super surveillance systems are you going to be, and whether those systems are evolving or lacking behind. What systems do you even rely on? There was a time when the internet felt optional, right? In the 1990s, maybe at the beginning of the 1990s, early 2000s, the internet was just something that was brand new, probably optional. It wasn't going to change the entire world, right? But look at us now in 2026. Everybody has access to the internet all across the world. Financial infrastructure is now entering that same phase. And you have to make the decision if you are just going to watch this phase pass by, or if you are going to be in position to be the Joseph of your era and prepare for these times. If you are listening and watching and following along closely, know that the State of the Diaspora occurs April 19th. There are limited seats available, about 8 to 12 people. We are not just going over where to go, but how to think, how to position yourself, and what needs to be done before you ever step on a plane to leave America or leave Thailand or leave Korea or leave wherever you are to come to Southern Africa. You need to know how to build a life that does not depend on a single system, because the world is not necessarily ending, but it is reorganizing at record speed. And those who understand the pattern early, well, they're going to move different. Check out the links in the description. I'll see you in the next one.